third of businesses say their staff don't have basic literacy and numeracy skills, and they're blaming failures in the education system. Today's report also found that 90% of employers want schools to assess young people on more than just academic skills. Half say the whole economy would be better off if education was overhauled, and it's estimated that an education shake-up could boost the economy by £125 billion. So, why aren't young people prepared for work, and are schools to blame? James, what are your thoughts?
Look, it's very easy to blame schools for all of the woes that we have, and I'm sure that the educational system does need changing. But from my experience, having trained in real estate and investment banking and recruited a lot of people along the way, all of the issues that we have they've always been there. And they're always going to be there to an extent, because until you get into the workplace, unless you have very specific stuff designed, you really do need to have those academic skills. Having said that, simple things like how to dress, and I don't mean in a sort of snotty fashion, you know, nice things, not nice things, but there are certain ways that you should dress and present yourself in the workplace. How to communicate, for example, in the workplace. And this, again, isn't about, I think in the past we've focused on accent and grammar. And yes, there's an element of grammar, but actually it's about how to do it in a way that's respectful to your fellow colleagues. You can't talk the same way that you might talk to your friends, whether it's university or school students, in that way. And also how to manage up. Things like, how on earth do you communicate that something might be going wrong? Because you're so used to at school, it's either right or it's wrong.
Yeah.
And therefore, you get told it's right or it's wrong. You're going to get told off if it's wrong. Whereas in the workplace...
or something.
Exactly. Whereas in the workplace, to manage up when something is wrong, that you don't understand something, that you need something explaining, or that you need to do something in a different way, or just don't know how to do it, actually there's nothing wrong with that. So I think there are a whole range of skills, combined with the fact that the workplace is changing, and we need different things from our new recruits in the workplace. We need to make sure that we are prepared for the digital world, and we need to be ahead. So it's thinking and working and getting things done and focusing, those sorts of things, which aren't really taught in school, need to be.
Let's hear from Sharon. Sharon, what do you think about this? Why do you think that schools, you know, do you think it's a problem with schools? Why do you think kids aren't quite ready when they hit the workplace?
Well, firstly, if a child is nearly illiterate and they're allowed to leave school, it's the school and it's the parents. It's a double thing. And as far as you saying, about being, you know, ready for an interview, that is something that's taught, and that should be taught at school. Skills for when you leave and you're going to interview for a job, that should be taught in schools, because there are cases where a lot of parents don't actually know themselves. But half of it is schools that needs to be all reviewed about a different way to educate. We live in a totally different world, but no child should be allowed to leave school illiterate.
Well, no, I totally agree with Sharon there, that it doesn't all just come from school. But at school, we are teaching children to pass exams, and we're not teaching them about skills and communication. I feel like things were slightly different 100 years ago when I was at school, where you would leave, a lot of people left and had apprenticeships, and they were doing physical, proper work, whereas now everybody's sights seem to be on going to university and sometimes come out with degrees that are not necessarily the most practical, hands-on. But it's also down to the individual child and what they experience at home. But I think, yes, the education system definitely needs to incorporate a lot more things that teach our children how to be practical people.
I think there's a lack of knowledge as well. There's a kind of culture which suggests that you can find anything out that you need to at the tip of your fingertips. You know, you can just go on your iPhone and check something out. People have said to me, oh, well, I can Google that. I don't need to know that. There's a sort of knowledge vacuum, it seems to me. The kids, quite often, I mean, my own kids will sometimes say to me, if I've corrected something they've written, they'll say, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because I think that's the attitude in school. They don't get told, you have to write this in a particular way, you have to structure it. It's a proper sentence, you know, you have to put, you know, commas in the right place, you have to put, you know, apostrophes in the right place. And I think there's not enough of that going on. I know it sounds a bit old-fashioned, but actually, you know, it's quite useful to know, you know, the countries that surround Germany. It's quite useful to know, you know, if you're going anywhere, how to read a map. you know, instead of just dropping a pin and following what it tells you to go, in case you get suddenly power cuts.
And Sharon, what do you make about what Mike said, that some kids are just Googling everything, it doesn't matter not having knowledge anymore? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's really sad that the generation coming up really don't know how to write a letter. And he's totally right about punctuation and just certain skills that are so lacking in the generation that's coming up. But the way to change is through education. So the whole educational system has to be retrained, and they have to educate children to what's important in today's world. Not what happened 100 years ago or 50 years ago. It's about the world is changing so fast that the educational system is not able to catch up with it.
Nicola, what do you make of
I think
this?
there's a lot of unfair focus on young people here, because actually this survey included all people in the workforce, and it was found that 35% of new employees, they were struggling with literacy and numeracy. Of course, that's not always going to be young people. I think that assessments need to take into account ability rather than just literacy and numeracy. I understand they should be a given, and I'm totally with Sharon when she says that, you know, no child should leave school without the ability to read and write. But I thought James Dyson said something really clever, I thought, today in response to this. He said, the system doesn't measure creativity, it measures what you can remember of other people's facts. And I think that's spot on, because when I was at school, I was good at memorising things. And I often thought that, well, will I ever be able to use this in my career? Because 5 years later, I can tell you now, I could not remember a single thing that I learned in biology. It's about learning the process and how to do things rather than just being able to reel off facts. And I think a lot of the time kids who get A's and A stars are the ones who just can memorise things really quickly.
Isn't that part of it? But then the other part is how to work, how to think, how to communicate. So part of it, I think, you do have to have some base knowledge. Otherwise, you end up, if you don't have to learn some stuff, whatever stuff we decide and deem is important, then you end up in Mike's world where everybody just Googles everything. That's a disaster because you're relying on somebody else. But there is the second point, though, about creativity, learning how to think. That's the difference that our education system in the past has been really good at. That's why we create so much stuff in this country. We need to have more of it.
And it's about a mix, isn't it? It's about having that basic knowledge, but being able to problem solve, and the confidence that creativity